Spectacular. I think we'll do questions too, but before we do, I have the same question that I asked Chris, which is, what kind of advice do you've done a lot. You've done 5 companies, you've gone public, you've raised venture capital, you've taken angel money. What advice do you have for entrepreneurs?
It's, you know, I became an entrepreneur for the same reason I think a lot of people become entrepreneurs. I couldn't get a job. I came out of school in 1991, and it was the last Great Recession. Just nobody was hiring, so I effectively started a business. I think I agree with Chris. The people that you work with are very important, but as a serial entrepreneur, I'll probably be a little more practical than Chris in that capital is capital. I find that most investors provide very limited, if any, added value. I think they talk about it a lot. I've rarely seen it. Unless you're getting capital from Andreessen Horowitz, Excel, or Sequoia, you're not really going to get massive amounts of added value from the capital. The thing that's made me successful, other than probably an abject and absolute fear of failure, is tenacity. I am a person that will be as tenacious about something as you could ever be. And I will continue to focus on that. And when asked, what can somebody do as an entrepreneur that will differentiate you from either other entrepreneurs or the people that have been successful and not successful, it is tenacity with the ability to pivot. You want to be tenacious about how you run your business, but you want to be realistic about what's not working and what is working. And I think the people who are the most tenacious sometimes have a very difficult time pivoting. They look at it and say, no, this is my idea and I'm sticking with it, and they run it right into the ground because the idea is not the right idea. Whereas if you can be incredibly tenacious in one front and flexible enough to say, okay, this is not working as I would like it to work, let me move in this direction. For example, XL Marketing Corp was originally an online education marketing company. That was the concept. We built this large database and we grew it into a $40 or $50 million business in 2 years, but we realized we weren't going to grow into a $300 or $400 million business as an online education business, and that sector has come under massive amounts of regulatory issues and other issues. So we pivoted. And today, online education is well under half our revenues less than 2 years later, because we've been strategic about how we've managed our business and how we've grown. Had we decided to stick with online education, which is what got us to that kind of first jumping off point, we would have never gone to the next level. But we were willing to do that.
Tenacity plus the ability to recognize opportunity to pivot into.
Yeah. I mean, a lot
That's
of people,
tough, though.
It's personality-wise, it takes a very unusual person, because you've got to be, and I couldn't do it at first. It took me many years to be able to grow into somebody that could step back and say, you know what, this is not right. This has gotten us here and we're successful, but it's not going to get me to where I want to go.
Super. We've got time for a few questions. Michael Goldstein. This is a friendly. This is going to be a softball.
At least somebody has finally recognized that.
Spends his days in New York. I don't get to talk to him that much. Talk about the differences between the New York tech scene, where there's a whole lot of different things happening than there are here, and how some of the best practices there can be implemented.
Yeah,
the question was, talk about the differences between New York and DC,
yeah,
and talk about the best practices.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I hate to say this, it's very difficult to build a technology company in Washington today. It is difficult to get people, it is difficult to recruit, it's difficult to get the expertise that you need to scale that business and rapidly. Where in New York, it's actually very easy. I always say that if you want to start a technology company, go to Silicon Valley. If you want to start a marketing company, go to New York. And it really, really is. New York is a very exciting place to be from a technological perspective. I always have had visions of kind of how do we do that here, and Steve Case and his team building their fund and other people bringing capital is going to help, but it's a very different environment when you look at New York and how kind of vibrant it is from a growth perspective, and you look at DC, which is kind of always just gotten there and then falls back. I feel like when, usually great markets come from great companies, right? So you look at Silicon Valley, you can go back far enough and trace all those roots to Hewlett-Packard, right? You can go back to HP and say this was the guy. I mean, you could argue it, but most people would say that's the guy that started the Valley. You can look in New York, most of the agency businesses started the marketing functionality. You look here, kind of, we had UUNet, we had AOL, we had MCI, and we kept getting there, but then what would happen is, we're so close to New York, everybody goes to New York when they really hit it, and they don't come back. I'm an example of that, but you know, it's just much easier to do that. I'm here a day a week, but when you look at the marketplace, it's difficult to break through. If you're an entrepreneur and you're here to raise money, I would tell you, focus on raising the capital and putting together your team as you run your business. I think a lot of people try to just focus on raising capital. If you take your eye off the business ball, what's going to happen is by the time you get to the closing table, because here's the problem with today's capital markets. Used to be able to close a venture deal in probably, and I'm estimating, somebody here probably knows better than I do, in 45 to 60 days. I mean, so used to be 90 days, right, April? What's it now?
6 months to
At least, right?
if you get it at all.
If you can get the capital at all. So I remember when we did Infonic, our first round was actually a group called Mid-Atlantic Venture Fund, which I don't think is around anymore. Tom Smith's now at DeVoe Smith, and a bunch of the guys have moved around. We did the presentation down at their office, and I had the term sheet on my fax machine by the time I got back to my, my office space. Those days are over. And that was not just a function of we were good or not good, it was a function of the times. Today, by the time you get to the closing table, if you haven't run your business, you're going to be so off on the model that you've given them 9 months ago, they're going to not close. Or they're going to beat the living shit out of you on value. So it is mission critical when you build these businesses to do both. You've got to focus on running your business. And the thing I always say, if you build a great company, capital will follow you. It's just that simple.